bringing a little bling to your spring. Hello there, welcome back to the June Made channel. My name is Paula Jean, and if you saw my previous video, you'll know that I am in the middle of working on a little mini green wardrobe. So I'm still working on that, but I wanted to pop on here and tell you guys about a brand new pattern. It just released this week, and I happen to be on the testing team. And I was not obligated to say anything about it on here or anything like that. I just think it's a really cool pattern, and I wanted to tell you guys about it. So this is the edge fold top and dress pattern from Misusu Patterns. And I'll tell you a bit about why I like Misusu Patterns a little bit later. But first, this is the top. So this sparkly version was my final version. The one Betty is wearing here is my muslin that I actually wear, very wearable muslin. And some of the features of this top, this is a knit top and dress. And I believe in the instructions it says it requires at least 25% stretch. But I'll be honest with you. This fabric has less than 25% stretch, as do two of the fabrics that I used for Betty's version here. Someone on the testing team also made a woven version, and I'm not sure about the adjustments she had to make when she did that, but she made it work. So definitely if you're a beginner or you're a beginner in terms of sewing with knits, follow the instructions for sure, but just know that there is a little bit of wiggle room in here in my experience anyway. So this, like I said, it's a top and dress. The top and dress both each come in two lengths. The top that I made is kind of between the two lengths. There's a regular version that hits kind of at the hip line, and then there's a cropped version that hits like just below the waist, and my version is right in between the two. That kind of suited my proportions best. And for the dress version, I believe it hits at just below the knee and at about mid-calf. One of the coolest things about this, so Misusu Patterns, Elle the designer, she obviously has a real love for geometry. All of her patterns kind of have these neat angles, geometric shapes, kind of structured architectural elements to them. I have made her stereo sweater and the Doris skirt. And this is probably one of her simplest patterns, and I think that was one of her goals with this, is that she wanted to make a pattern that novice sewists felt comfortable tackling, because you can look at some of her patterns and think like, oh my God, how does that all come together? The instructions are fantastic and they all do come together. So you feel like you've pulled off a bit of a magic trick when you've made them. But what I particularly love about this style is that she has found a way to make a structured, linear, architectural looking garment work on a three-dimensional body. I always find with styles like this, I love seeing them on other people. When I try them on, I kind of feel like I look like a round peg in a square hole. Like, okay, yeah, they fit technically, but they don't really look like they're supposed to go together. The brilliance of this pattern, which only has 3 pieces, and there's no ribbing and nothing extra that you need for any finishing. It has 3 pieces only. It has a front piece, a back piece, and then it's got this really cool side panel. This side panel is what allows you to have a bum and a bust and just allows for a bit of shaping that still keeps the front and the back lines. It just respects that kind of linear nature of the design. And so I think that is a particularly brilliant thing. And let me show you the neckline. The neckline is amazing. So it makes basically 5 points all around the neck. The reason that it does that is because the back piece, let me see if I can tip it here and show you. The back piece actually is longer than the front, so it comes all the way up to the front and hits right at the collarbone, and that's what helps to create this cool shape. And Also, the front and the back are seamed, so that's another place that you can take in an adjustment. I always love having a center front and center back seam because it allows me to account for my sway back and such. I'll show you what I did on my pieces to account for that later. But yeah, so as you can tell, this has a little bit of an 80s throwback vibe to it, which also spoke to my nostalgic region of my heart. I was a teen in the mid 80s, so this really spoke to me. And I used this sequined fabric kind of for that reason, but also because I have had this fabric for at least 15 years, if not more. I saw it at a fabric store in Montreal and I really loved it. For some reason, I only got a meter of it. I don't know why. I'm kicking myself a bit now because I thought this would have made a really, really neat little mini dress that would have looked fantastic over like a leather skirt or little leather pair of pants, neither of which I have. But anyway, the idea was there and I would have loved to fulfill it. But I still love the top. And if you are at all experienced with sequins, you'll know that they can be kind of scratchy. And these are like really, really flat and very small, but they're still a little scratchy. So again, with the side panel, I was able to make this and use a really soft rib knit from my stash for the side panel, which means that I don't get that scratchiness when I'm swinging my arms and walking down the street. Now you might be wondering, well, yeah, but what about the neck finishing? If it's facings, how did you do that? So I am actually going to show you, I'm going to put on Betty's version of the top here so that I can take this off and show you how I dealt with the sequin seams. And I'll also show you the pattern pieces and tell you a little bit more about that. Alrighty, so this is my muslin version on, you can kind of, it's a little bit more structured fabric so you can kind of see the lines of it, and I couldn't resist doing a little 80s scrunchy hair action for you. So let me take you through the pattern pieces and show you. So this is the front piece. So right here is the neckline, or part of the neckline. This is part of the sleeve. This is the side seam. That comes out down at a diagonal. And then this is the center front seam. The adjustment that I did for my bust and the way that I wanted it to sit on my body was basically to make the size that corresponded to my bust measurement. And then I just took it in under the bust so that it still is a very relaxed fit, but it just kind of conforms to the curves of my body a little bit more while still respecting the lines of the design. So that's all I did, so that would normally be a straight line here, and then I just curved it in a little bit here. I did the same thing on the back piece. So you can see that this back piece is a lot longer because it comes up and makes this little shoulder seam right here to make that cool neckline. And then this again is the sleeve, this is the side, and then this is the center back. So I did the same thing here where normally that would be a straight line all the way down to the bottom. I just curved in to account for my sway back so that it would conform to that a little better. And then what I think is the brilliance of this pattern, here is the side piece. This is where it attaches to the front and this is where it attaches to the back. And so this is the underarm right here and the side panel, and then it expands out and allows you to have some hips. So that is that. And then this is a pattern that I would recommend this to beginners. I never know kind of what patterns to suggest to people who are just starting out sewing, because so many people have other creative pursuits that kind of apply to sewing. So just because you haven't sewn before, maybe you've done some other creative things where pieces fitting together kind of make sense in your brain. So I don't know your life, and I don't want to peg you just because you haven't sewn before doesn't mean that you can't tackle a more challenging project. the simplicity of the number of pieces, the fact that you don't have to do anything like a ribbed collar where you have to stretch it or account for different stretch amounts or anything. I think this is a really great beginner project, especially if you're an adventurous beginner who wants to maybe level up your skill a little bit, because matching, the way that this is constructed, when you match all the pieces together, what's really key is that you kind of match all of these points, and there's a little bit of twisting and manipulation, but the instructions are great, and I believe in you, and I think you can do it. So the other thing that's really cool about this side panel, I know I'm going over the moon for this side panel, but I really like it. A number of people on the testing team did things like stretch mesh on the side, or a flocked mesh. You could do like a lace that you either line with another thin knit that's maybe matches your skin color, and it can look like it's see-through, or it can be see-through if that's your jam. But yeah, I also think it would be really neat to have like bands of fabric that are that you stack up and then just kind of cut them to the dimensions of this piece and then attach them to the front and the back. I think that could be really fun. So how did I deal with the sequins? All right. Well, I told you about the side panel, so that was great. So let me just turn this inside out and let you know what I did. So what I had to deal with was the front seam and the back seam and the facings of the neck and the sleeve. I didn't really have to deal with the side panel seams too much, because when you sew the side panel, I could press the seam allowances to the front and to the back and then do the top stitching. So that took care of covering any sequins that would have come through on one side of those seams. For the facings, this fabric ended up having a very wide swath of fabric along the selvage that didn't have any sequins on it. So I took advantage of that and I cut off those bands, and then I cut strips that I then folded, and when I had a facing, I took the raw edge of that folded piece and I serged it along the very edge of the facing. That left me with a nice, neat folded edge that I didn't have to worry about like turning over and pressing. I just stitched down that folded edge ideally where the fold would happen to make it the facing. I ended up cutting those strips a little bit too narrow. I don't know why my measurements were off, whatever. It still worked, but when I stitched it down, then it ended up covering the sequins, and then it makes it a lot more comfortable for me on my neck. What I did on the front and the back seams is a version of that, but I just took a single strip. After I had sewn the seam, I serged the strip to one side of the seam and then carefully serged it to the other side of the seam, and then I top stitched it the same way that I think the instructions say to top stitch. Maybe I just top stitched willy-nilly. I don't know. I don't remember. Anyway, I don't know if you can actually see that. You probably can't, because my thread matches and this is a dark color, but there is some top stitching on that seam. So that's how I took care of that. And because those strips were a little bit narrow, I do get a little bit of scratching, like if I'm moving around a lot on my neckline, but I can still wear this no problem. And if I ever make this again in sequins, I will just make that strip a little bit wider. So that is the edge fold top and dress, and thank you for joining me on this. I hope I've intrigued you with this pattern, at least enough to go check it out. If you are seeing this before April 30th, 2023, Elle actually is having a launch sale, and I believe it's 25% off. So if you're seeing that before then, I don't know when I'm getting this video up. Hopefully it's going to be before then. But yeah, you can go check that out. Take advantage of the sale if you like. And yeah, and have fun with this pattern. So I'm going to get back to my green garments. And in the meantime, if you are enjoying this content, please consider giving me a subscribe or a like. Let me know in the comments. And I hope you're having a beautiful day, a beautiful week, and I will see you next time.